The cold blue light of the Galactic Council headquarters cast long shadows across the massive, impossibly high architecture. Ambassador John Harper stood motionless, his weathered face betraying none of the tension that had built over 15 years of service. His eyes, steady and focused, surveyed the semicircular arrangement of alien representatives before him. Humanity had been part of the Galactic Compact for almost a century now. When first contact occurred, the species had been welcomed with measured enthusiasm, though quickly confined to a tight regulatory framework. Strict limitations on technology development, territorial expansion, and political influence had been imposed, all in the name of galactic stability. For generations, humans had accepted these constraints, grateful for a seat at the interstellar table, even if it was positioned firmly at the far end. High Counselor Zexatrol, a seven-limbed being whose translucent skin pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, leaned forward. Its voice translator emitted a series of melodious tones that somehow still managed to convey condescension. The Council has reviewed the human petition for expanded colonization rights and accelerated technological development permissions. Zexatrol announced mandibles, clicking softly beneath its speech apparatus. Given the recent incidents involving human experimentation with artificial sentience and your continued attempts to modify spatial drive technologies beyond approved parameters, we have determined additional restrictions are necessary. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Effective immediately, all human research into artificial intelligence is prohibited. Additionally, your next-generation spatial drive program will be suspended, and the planned expansion of colonial territories in the Orion Spur is hereby denied. The vote was unanimous. The council members nodded in collective satisfaction. They had long viewed humanity as dangerously innovative and unpredictable qualities that threatened the carefully balanced hierarchy of species that had maintained peace for millennia. Ambassador Harper's expression remained unchanged. He simply nodded, once reached into his pocket, and placed a small crystal data drive on the table before him. The action was so understated that several council members leaned forward, uncertain of what they were witnessing. High Counselor, distinguished representatives. Harper spoke clearly, his voice echoing in the sudden silence. I have been authorized to inform you that as of this moment, humanity is withdrawing from the Galactic Compact. The chamber erupted into chaos. Voices shouted over one another in multiple languages, while translators struggled to keep pace. Zexatrol's bioluminescence flared brightly in what those familiar with the species recognized as alarm. This is unprecedented, bellowed Counselor Dreth, a massive reptilian whose armored scales rattled with agitation. No species has ever withdrawn from the compact. The economic consequences alone would devastate your worlds. Harper's calm never wavered. The crystal drive I've provided contains our formal notice of withdrawal, along with our implementation timeline. All human representatives, military assets, research stations, commercial enterprises, and colonial operations will begin immediate disengagement. We call it Operation Exodus. This is absurd posturing, Zexatrol declared, its translator unable to fully mask the uncertainty in its voice. Your species cannot survive without compact protection and trade networks. The human worlds would collapse within a standard cycle. Ambassador Harper allowed himself the smallest of smiles. Perhaps, but that is our choice to make. As he turned to leave, Counselor Vreen, whose species prided themselves on their powers of perception, called out, You have planned this for some time, haven't you? Harper paused at the chamber door. Humanity has spent generations adapting to your restrictions. We've learned to do more with less, to innovate within constraints. Did you truly believe we wouldn't prepare for every contingency, including this one? With that, he departed, leaving behind a council chamber frozen in stunned silence. Diane Lewis, Harper's assistant for the past decade, was waiting in the corridor. Her dark eyes were alert, her tablet already displaying cascading information streams. It's done, Harper said simply. Phase 1, signals are transmitting, she confirmed. All human assets throughout compact space are receiving withdrawal codes now. The first vessels will begin disengagement within the hour. Harper nodded. And our insurance policies? Already activated, Lewis responded. The Council will begin experiencing system anomalies within days. Nothing catastrophic, just enough to make our absence noticeable. The human withdrawal was executed with precision that even their critics had to admire. Across 2,000 star systems, human military vessels disengaged from joint defense operations. Research stations archived their data and sealed their facilities. Diplomatic outposts closed their doors. Agricultural colonies harvested final crops and shut down terraforming equipment. Commercial enterprises terminated contracts and recalled their vessels. It was not a chaotic exodus, but a coordinated, methodical disengagement, the kind that could only come from years of careful planning. The impact was not immediately apparent. The first week saw mainly confusion and diplomatic scrambling as the Council attempted to negotiate humanity's return. Ambassador Harper and his team had departed to the human border world of Nexus Station, which now served as their primary diplomatic outpost. All communication from the Council was acknowledged politely and met with the same response humanity would consider returning under a fundamentally restructured agreement, or not at all. By the second week, the effects began to cascade. The Scourge Raiders, a nomadic species that preyed on shipping lanes, seemed to somehow know precisely which border sectors had been protected by human patrol vessels. Attacks on commercial shipping tripled. How did they know exactly where our defensive gaps would appear? Demanded Counselor Trell during an emergency session. It's as if they had our patrol schedules. Zexatrol's bioluminescence flickered anxiously. The humans must have sold the information as they departed. Unlikely, countered Vreen, whose analytical mind was valued even when his insights were unwelcome. The humans have historically suffered the greatest losses to Scourge raids. They would not strengthen an enemy simply to spite us. More likely the raiders have been monitoring our patrol patterns all along, and the humans were simply more effective at randomizing their deployments and creating uncertainty. Their absence exposes weaknesses that were always present. This was merely the beginning. By the third week, agricultural systems across 17 key compact worlds began experiencing anomalies. Automated harvest predictions had to be revised downward. Life support systems on 3 major space stations developed inexplicable inefficiencies, requiring evacuation of non-essential personnel. The central banking network reported discrepancies in transaction logging, necessitating partial system shutdowns that slowed commerce throughout the quadrant. They sabotaged our systems, Dreth roared during yet another emergency council meeting. Vreen's multiple eyes blinked in sequence, his species equivalent of a contemplative sigh. That would be an act of war, and there is no evidence of malicious code or tampering. The more likely explanation is that many of these systems were designed with human input or maintained with human expertise that we no longer have access to. Impossible, Zexatrol insisted. The compact has existed for thousands of years before humans joined us. We don't need their primitive expertise. Perhaps, a new voice interjected. Counselor Ellerai, whose crystalline form rarely moved or spoke unless absolutely necessary, surprised the gathering. Yet it is curious how many of our most critical systems have incorporated human innovations over the past century. Their particular talent for what they call creative problem-solving has been quietly integrated into countless aspects of compact infrastructure. The Council's frustration grew as the weeks became months. Attempts to replace human contributions revealed just how extensively humanity had become integrated into compact operations. Human agricultural techniques had been improving crop yields across dozens of worlds. Human security consultants had been patching vulnerabilities in defense networks. Human engineers had introduced subtle refinements to life support systems, power distribution grids, and computational networks. None of this had been apparent while humans occupied their carefully restricted position in the hierarchy of species. Only in their absence did the full extent of their contributions become clear. 4 months after the withdrawal began, the first diplomatic overture arrived at Nexus Station. Ambassador Harper received a delegation led by Counselor Vreen, whose analytical mind had apparently won out over Zexatrol's pride. The Council acknowledges that certain aspects of the Compact's relationship with humanity may deserve reconsideration, Vreen stated carefully. Harper nodded politely. We would certainly welcome such reconsideration. Perhaps, Vreen continued, multiple eyes, blinking rapidly. We could discuss targeted technical assistance in several key sectors, while negotiations proceed, as a gesture of goodwill. Harper smiled. We would be delighted to offer technical assistance teams. I believe we could have specialists in agricultural systems, defense network security, and life support optimization ready within days. The teams that arrived at Compact facilities over the following weeks were ostensibly there to provide temporary support while new negotiations proceeded. In reality, they served as constant reminders of human capabilities and the consequences of their absence. Each team was led by a diplomat, authorized to engage in preliminary discussions about potential new terms for human participation in galactic affairs. Karen Young led the agricultural delegation. Her team's improvements to failing crop yields on 3 critical worlds earned her direct meetings with the Agricultural Directorate. During one such session, she casually mentioned, "It's remarkable what we've achieved on our independent colonies when freed from cultivation restrictions. We've increased protein yield by 300% on New Montana using symbiotic growth techniques." Sam Baker's military consultation team shored up degrading defense networks along the Scourge border. In meetings with Compact Security Command, he shared tactical simulations demonstrating how a joint human Compact fleet, operating under unified command rather than segregated protocol, could reduce piracy by 70% using fewer resources. Valerie Foster's engineering corps restored optimal function to life support systems on Centauri Hub, a major trade nexus. During the official handover briefing, she included reference designs for next-generation systems that could reduce energy consumption by 40% while increasing reliability. These are already standard on human stations, she noted. We'd be happy to discuss implementation partnerships under the right cooperative framework. Eric Wilson's data integrity team stabilized the banking network in half the projected time. In his final report, he included an analysis of transaction vulnerabilities that could only be addressed through a fundamental redesign incorporating quantum authentication technology the Compact had previously forbidden humans from developing. This pattern repeated across dozens of sectors, humans providing immediate assistance while simultaneously demonstrating capabilities that had been deliberately restricted. Each specialist team included diplomatic officers, authorized to discuss terms under which these technologies and techniques might become available through renewed cooperation. 6 months after the withdrawal began, a formal invitation arrived for Ambassador Harper to bring a negotiation team to Free Haven Station, neutral territory, at the intersection of human space and Compact jurisdiction. The invitation was signed not just by High Counselor Zexatrol, but by representatives of all 7 major species that compose the Compact's leadership. They're finally ready to talk, Harper told his senior staff as they prepared for departure. But they'll still try to minimize concessions. They'll offer technical exemptions and special status, attempting to preserve the fundamental hierarchy. Diane Lewis nodded. The negotiation team is prepared. Greg Walsh has developed what he calls the Comprehensive Reset, a completely new framework for human-Compact relations. Will they accept it? Lewis smiled thinly. Not at first. But they need us more than they're willing to admit, and Walsh is very good at helping people accept realities they'd rather deny. Free Haven Station lived up to its name, a massive cylindrical habitat, spinning in the darkness of interstellar space. Its political neutrality maintained by a complex web of treaties and mutual interests. The station's Grand Assembly Hall had been configured with a circular negotiation table, symbolically placing all participants on equal footing. The compact delegation arrived, first led by Zexatrol, and including senior representatives from all major species. They were visibly discomfited by the equal seating arrangement, but took their positions without complaint, a telling concession before negotiations even began. Ambassador Harper led the human delegation, but immediately upon seating, he yielded the floor to Greg Walsh, a silver-haired man whose kindly appearance belied one of the sharpest diplomatic minds in human space. Distinguished representatives. Walsh began his voice gentle, yet carrying easily throughout the chamber. We appreciate your willingness to meet. Rather than beginning with incremental proposals, I believe it would be most productive to present our comprehensive vision for a renewed relationship. With a gesture, he activated the central holographic display. A document appeared titled Mutual Cooperation and Development Accord. What we propose is not a modification of the existing compact structure, but a new framework for engagement, Walsh continued. The fundamental principle is simple: equal standing, equal contribution, equal benefit. Zexatrol's bioluminescence pulsed rapidly. Impossible. The compact hierarchy is based on historical contribution and proven stability. Humanity has been part of galactic civilization for barely a century. Walsh nodded understandingly. Yet in that brief time, our contributions have become essential to compact operations, a fact the past 6 months have demonstrated. The hierarchy you reference was established thousands of years ago under vastly different circumstances. We propose a system based not on historical position, but on current capability and contribution. He expanded the holographic display, revealing key provisions of the proposed accord. 1. Equal voting rights on the Galactic Council with proportional representation, based on population rather than species classification. 2. Freedom of technological development with shared oversight committees composed of all signatory species. 3. Open territorial expansion rights within established safety parameters applicable to all species. 4. Mutual defense obligations with integrated command structures. 5. Unrestricted research access to ancient artifacts and technologies with sharing of all discoveries. This is not merely a human proposal, Walsh emphasized. This accord would transform relationships among all member species, creating a truly cooperative galactic community rather than a hierarchical structure. The compact representatives exchanged troubled glances. Councillor Dreth was the first to respond, armored scales, rattling with agitation. This would overturn millennia of established order. The lower-tier species would demand similar treatment. The entire foundation of the compact would collapse. Walsh smiled gently. Is the foundation so fragile that it cannot withstand evolution? All successful biological organisms adapt to changing environments. Should successful political organizations do any less? Councillor Vreen's multiple eyes focused intently on the document. The practical benefits are undeniable. Integrated defense alone would significantly improve security across all territories. Collaborative technological development would accelerate advancement for all species. But the political consequences, Zexatrol began, would be significant, Walsh acknowledged. Change always is. But consider the alternative. Humanity has demonstrated it can function independently. Other species are watching closely. How many could follow our example if the compact remains rigid? Would a diminished compact, gradually losing members to independence, be stronger than an evolved compact that embraces equal partnership? The debate raged for hours, then days. The compact representatives cycled through predictable stages: denial, anger, bargaining, and gradually reluctant acceptance. Walsh and his team remained patient, addressing each concern, methodically demonstrating how the proposed framework would benefit all species, not just humanity. On the 4th day, during a heated exchange about technological development restrictions, Leanna Mason, a former ambassador who had joined the human delegation as a senior advisor, finally lost patience. Let's be absolutely clear, she interrupted, her voice sharp after hours of circular discussion. Humanity will not return to a subordinate position. Period. We've spent generations accepting constraints that were justified as necessary for stability, but function primarily to maintain the power of established species. We will not do so again. Her bluntness silenced the chamber. You speak of stability, she continued into the quiet. We see stagnation. You regulate innovation claiming safety concerns. We see fear of disruption to an established order. The past 6 months have demonstrated two critical facts. The compact needs humanity's contributions, and humanity can function without the compact. The question is not whether the hierarchy will change it, is whether that change happens through cooperation or dissolution. After Mason's intervention, the tone of negotiations shifted perceptibly. The compact representatives began engaging more substantively with the provisions of the accord, rather than simply rejecting its premise. Technical teams from both sides worked through implementation details, while senior negotiators addressed core principles. By the second week, preliminary agreement had been reached on 3 of the 5 major provisions. Technological development rights and artifact research access remained contentious, but even there, the discussions had moved from outright rejection to conditional acceptance frameworks. Walsh maintained a patient, collaborative approach throughout, continually emphasizing mutual benefit rather than human advantage. When Zexatrol finally proposed a compromise on technological oversight, equal representation on review committees, with unanimity requirements for restrictions, Walsh immediately accepted, understanding the practical implications would favor innovation. After 18 days of intense negotiation, the delegates initialed a framework agreement. Final approval would require ratification by the full Council and human government, but the core principles had been established: equal standing, collaborative governance, and shared advancement. As the initialing ceremony concluded, Councillor Vreen approached Ambassador Harper privately. Your people planned this withdrawal with remarkable precision, the perceptive alien observed. How long? Harper allowed himself a small smile. The contingency planning began the day we joined the compact. The specific implementation strategy was developed over the past decade, as it became increasingly clear that gradual integration would never lead to equal standing. Vreen's eyes blinked in sequence. A lesson for us all. We underestimated not just your technical capabilities, but your strategic patience. A common misconception, Harper replied. Many species see human innovation and assume impulsiveness. They miss the planning beneath the creativity. And if we had not invited you to negotiate, Vreen asked, then we would have continued our independent development while maintaining diplomatic channels. Sooner or later, the benefits of genuine cooperation would have become impossible to ignore. The return of humanity to compact affairs proceeded methodically over the following months. Human technical teams expanded their advisory roles into full operational partnerships. Defense forces reintegrated under new Joint Command protocols. Research collaborations formed with unprecedented freedom to pursue innovation. Throughout this transition, the compact itself underwent transformation. The full Council, after heated debate, ratified the core principles of the Accord. Amendments to the foundational compact charter began working their way through the legislative process, slowly but with steady progress. Other species, long resigned to their assigned tiers in the hierarchy, watched these developments with increasing interest. Petitions for status reconsideration began appearing before the Council, citing the precedent of human reclassification. Academic and political discourse throughout compact space increasingly centered on questions of governance structure and representational equity. 1 year after John Harper had placed the crystal drive on the Council table, a formal ceremony was held at the Great Archive, the repository of all significant galactic treaties. The Mutual Cooperation and Development Accord was officially entered into the archive, with signatories from all major compact species and humanity. The human embassy on the compact capital world had been expanded, now occupying a prominent location that physically reflected humanity's new standing. Ambassador Harper stood at its entrance watching the streams of varied beings passing by, many now stopping to observe the architectural marvel that combined elements from all signatory species. Diane Lewis joined him, tablet in hand as always. "The Council has just approved the final amendments to the species classification system," she reported. "All hierarchical designations have been officially replaced with the partnership framework. It's done." Harper nodded satisfaction, evident in his eyes. "Not done, just beginning. This was never about human exceptionalism. It was about creating a system where any species can contribute to their full potential." "Do you think they understand that yet?" Lewis asked, gesturing toward the compact government complex visible in the distance. "Some do. Others will learn." Harper smiled slightly. "The universe is vast and we've barely explored a fraction of it. There are challenges coming that none of us can predict, challenges no single species can meet alone. True partnership isn't just morally right, it's practically essential." As they turned to enter the embassy, Harper paused for a final look at the bustling intersection of species and cultures before him. "Humanity didn't withdraw from the compact to prove our independence," he reflected. "We withdrew to make genuine integration possible." The embassy doors slid open, revealing a delegation of younger species representatives, waiting for their scheduled meeting, the first in a series of consultations on transitioning to the new partnership framework. "And now," Harper said, straightening his shoulders, "the real work begins." In his office later that evening, Harper reviewed reports from human worlds throughout compact space. Research centers were operating at full capacity, uninhibited by arbitrary restrictions. Colonial development was proceeding in previously forbidden systems. Technological innovation was accelerating across multiple fields. A message notification appeared on his terminal, a personal communication from Earth, specifically from the President's office. Harper opened it to find a simple question: was it worth it? He considered the past year, the risks taken, the hardships endured, the careful balance of pressure and restraint that had characterized Operation Exodus. He thought about the generations of humans who had accepted lesser status, while quietly building the capabilities and relationships that would eventually make equality possible. His response was equally simple: ask me in a century. Harper knew that true success would not be measured by the signing of an accord or the amendment of a charter. It would be measured by the civilization they built together in the centuries to come, a civilization where innovation was embraced rather than feared, where contribution determined influence rather than history or tradition, where cooperation replaced hierarchy as the foundation of galactic stability. As he closed the communication terminal, he reflected on the ancient Earth diplomat who had once observed that great powers never concede privilege willingly. It must be peacefully but firmly compelled through strategic leverage. Humanity had learned that lesson well, applying pressure precisely where it would achieve maximum effect, while always maintaining the possibility of mutually beneficial resolution. The true victory was not that humanity had secured a better position for itself, but that the compact was now evolving into something stronger, a genuine partnership of equals, rather than a stagnant hierarchy. The species that had once sought to contain human potential would now benefit from its full expression, just as humanity would benefit from the unique gifts of other species, unfettered by artificial constraints. The transition would not be without challenges. Centuries of hierarchical thinking would not disappear overnight. But the foundation had been laid for a fundamentally different relationship among galactic species, one based on merit contribution and mutual respect, rather than tradition and power. As Harper prepared to leave the office, he paused at the window overlooking the capital city. The lights of countless different species dwellings and businesses stretched to the horizon, a tapestry of galactic civilization that humans had fought so hard to join as equals. "We didn't just change our place in the order," he murmured to himself. "We changed the order itself." Perhaps that had been humanity's unique contribution all along, not just innovation or creativity or strategic thinking, but a fundamental unwillingness to accept artificial limitations, a determination to reach their full potential, and to create systems that allowed others to do the same. The stars, visible above the city skyline, seemed to shine more brightly now, beckoning with possibilities that were finally within reach, not just for humanity, but for all the sentient beings who shared this vast, mysterious galaxy. The journey ahead would be challenging, the work of building true partnership ongoing, but the path was clearer now than it had ever been. As Harper finally left the embassy, he carried with him the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the most powerful action was not confrontation, but strategic withdrawal, creating the space for others to recognize what had been there all along, the untapped potential of genuine cooperation. In the centuries to come, historians would debate whether humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization had been their technological innovations, their creative problem-solving, or their strategic vision. But those who had lived through the transformation understood that their most significant offering had been simply the courage to step away from an unjust system and the wisdom to return only when equality became possible. The Compact had spent a century trying to contain human potential. In the end, humanity had not fought against those constraints, they had simply walked away from them, demonstrating through their absence what true partnership could achieve. And in doing so, they had not just secured their own freedom, but created the possibility of freedom for countless others. It was perhaps the most human victory imaginable, achieved not through dominance, but through the patient strategic application of principles that ultimately benefited everyone involved. Not a triumph over the Compact, but a transformation of it into something better. As the Accord entered its implementation phase, discussions began about joint exploratory missions to regions of space previously considered too hazardous for individual species to navigate alone. Research teams composed of the 7 major species and humans prepared to investigate ancient artifacts with unprecedented freedom. Defense fleets reorganized into integrated units that leveraged the unique capabilities of each species. The withdrawal had been necessary, a strategic lever to force recognition of interdependence and the value of equal partnership. But it had always been a means to an end, not the end itself. The true goal had been to create a galactic community where differences were sources of strength rather than justifications for hierarchy. As Ambassador John Harper finally returned to his residence that night, he felt the weight of history, both the century of patient endurance that had preceded this moment and the centuries of possibility that would follow it. The crystal drive he had placed on the council table that fateful day had contained more than just a withdrawal notice. It had contained a vision of what the Compact could become if it embraced true partnership. That vision was now becoming reality, one carefully negotiated agreement at a time. The stars continued their eternal dance overhead, indifferent to the political transformations occurring among the tiny beings who traveled between them. But for those beings, human and non-human alike, the universe suddenly seemed a little more vast, a little more welcoming, and infinitely more full of possibility. And in the end, perhaps that had been the point all along.